This is the Vancouver UFO meetup on March the 3rd, 2021. Our guest is Tom Bowden. He's the Oregon State Director for Mufon. And Tom's background in ufology began way back about 1970. After he graduated from college, he became very interested in reading about UFOs in the early 70s. In 1975, Tom joined the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization. In the year 2000, he joined Mufon, which is a mutual UFO network, became a Mufon investigator. Within about a year, Tom became the Oregon State Director of Mufon. Since then, he's worked on hundreds of investigations and has continued reading the scholarly literature on UFOs. Check out the Oregon chapter website at oregonmufon.com, which explains a lot about how UFOs are inextricably intertwined with other aspects, what is commonly called the paranormal, also thought of as the transpersonal world. So Tom's talk in the Q&A tonight could encompass his Oregon UFO history slides, the rich history of UFO sightings in Oregon, and some of Oregon UFO cases that he's worked on. He will make time for discussion during and after the presentation. And if time permits, Tom can talk about UFOs and the national security, USA that is, and high strangeness experience, or how we can, and high strangeness experiences. So welcome to Vancouver UFO, Tom. We want to hear your story and what's going on in Oregon.
All right, thank you. In Oregon, it seems we get more than our share of UFO reports based on population. Even though some of the more populous states in the United States get more reports, but on a per capita basis, Oregon ranks fairly high. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is, first I'm going to go through an overview of some of the historical cases in Oregon, and then I'm going to talk about some of the more recent cases. But first I'm going to give you a little background on what I do as the Oregon State Director. Well, here's a question for you. Are you affiliated with Mufon?
I'm not.
Okay, well, I just want to give a little pitch for Mufon. I highly recommend it as an organization that should be supported, in my opinion. They are probably the only really robust organization that maintains a large force of field investigators and a large database of UFO reports that have been mostly investigated. You can find other collections of UFO cases, such as the National UFO Reporting Center run out of Washington State by Peter Davenport. The problem is Peter doesn't have a big crew of people to help him investigate, so he only can investigate a very few of the reports, and most of them are just raw reports that haven't been investigated thoroughly. He sometimes will put his opinion about a case, but it's usually pretty much a on-the-spot opinion as he records the case in his website, not a really thorough investigation. This is not to take anything away from Peter. It's just that he doesn't have a lot of people to help him with what he's doing. So he really can't do a lot of thorough investigation. But Mufon we really try to keep a cadre of active investigators working on cases all the time, so that if someone were to go and do research on the Mufon database, they would find cases that have already been processed by an investigator. They've made a determination whether it's really unidentified or whether it's a known phenomenon or a man-made object or incident that can be explained. So anyway, that's my little pitch for Mufon, and I highly recommend that people join and support Mufon. I also want to know that I want to let you know that several years ago at a Mufon symposium, I ran into a guy named Chris Rutkowski. Do you know him? And
I don't know about him.
Yeah, I bought one of his books, and I know that he's probably still, as far as I know, he's still active investigating cases there in Canada. I'm not sure exactly what town he lives in. You might know.
I think it's Winnipeg, right in central Canada, right?
Could be. I don't know. I'd have to see if I can find the book of his that I have and check to see if he has any information like that and contact information or whatever. All right. So I think now I'll launch into one of my presentations. So I'll go to share screen. And I want to go to this one here. I'm going to share the keynote. I'm far down here. I got to get back to the beginning. That's not the one I meant to share. Gosh. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, now the Oregon, pardon me, the Oregon Mufon website is mostly, the material there is mostly written by this gentleman, Keith Rowell. He used to be the assistant state director. He isn't currently, but this was written while he was still the assistant state director. He's got a lot of material there on the website that I think you might find interesting. He's quite the scholar, and he's read extensively on what's called transpersonal psychology, and he draws a lot of connections between UFO events that we might call paranormal or high strangeness events, and the subject of paranormal or transpersonal psychology. So he's got some articles about that on the website. So this is a little history here. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to keep this in in this mode because I find that the regular presentation mode sometimes locks up my session. I can't work it properly. So Oregon has over 1,000 UFO cases documented at various levels, mostly uninvestigated reports and news articles, and news article documented cases. They are in UFOCAT, NUFORC, and Mufon, and various other databases. So UFOCAT was an older database. I don't think it's functional any longer, but for a long time it was used to catalog UFO sightings. And Oregon has most of the usual types of UFO cases: abduction reports, triangle cases, classic saucers, photo cases, a radar case, videotapes, and digital videos, pardon me. Just like most places, the entity and landing reports are rare. We have one possible uninvestigated crash case, and I also have an uninvestigated landing case. Reasons for that are complicated. I'll tell you about the landing case first. This was several years ago. In December, someone contacted me and told me that he had an encounter with a landed object. And this was way down in southern Oregon, almost to the California state line. It had been raining really hard for that whole period. And it was days after the incident that he reported it. And I decided there was no point in me driving all across the state, almost to California, to look at an area where there was probably no evidence left because of the heavy rain. And so I never pursued it. And Oregon has many other kinds of cases too. Bigfoot sightings, we consider that at least some of those are related to UFOs. We have some interesting crop circles, cattle mutilations, and perhaps a rare flying entity case or two. We don't have any Loch Ness monster type cases though here in Oregon that I know of. The cases come from all over the state, but I think that probably you get the most cases from the more populated cities and counties of the state. The history of investigation in Oregon is spotty at best, and the early history is not known. We don't have any recorded history of it. We had some contactee groups that existed here in the 1950s and 60s in the Portland area. In the 1980s, John and Helen Zeller carried on MUFON investigation. Skip Schultz and then Mike Downey were state directors in 1990, and Tom and Keith took over in the 2000s. Here's the pitch for joining MUFON, which I've already covered. So we're going to go on and look at some things. Now, Kenneth Arnold, he's known for seeing what were later called flying saucers over Washington state. But after his sighting, the first place he landed was in Pendleton, Oregon. He was flying in a twin engine plane, I believe it was, a light plane. He was flying from Chehalis to Yakima when he saw these 9 odd-shaped objects. And there's a picture here you'll get to see. They were moving fast in a skipping motion between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams, and he estimated the speed at 1,300 to 1,700 miles per hour. He was on a mission to find a downed airplane. I guess he stopped in Yakima first, and then he went on to Pendleton. When he got to Pendleton, he was buttonholed by some reporters, and one of the Pendleton newspaper writers coined the term flying saucer, basically because Kenneth Arnold described the objects as moving like saucers skipping over the water. And that is where the term flying saucers really came from. Certainly there were a lot of saucer-shaped objects, but the popular term really is sort of stems from this incident. So there was a military investigation of Arnold's sighting, and then Arnold ended up being an investigator for, I think it was Fate magazine, doing an investigation of the Maury Island incident, which, now Keith wrote this, he calls it a hoax. I think the Maury Island incident is a little bit wrapped in mystery, and some people think it's a hoax, and I don't know, there's a lot of questions about it. Okay, the World War II Foo Fighters.
Oh,
Yes?
sorry, I have a question. What year did you say this was, the Kenneth Arnold sighting? You don't have the number there. What
June
year it was?
24th, 1947.
Okay.
It's right here.
Oh, that magic number. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Oops. Hang on. Just restoring that. Okay. So the Foo Fighters and the Swedish Ghost Rockets, you know, they occurred before this sighting. This Foo Fighters were in World War II. Swedish Ghost Rockets, that series of incidents happened around 1946. So here's Kenneth Arnold in his plane, and here's an artist's conception of what he said the objects looked like. So you can see they weren't round saucers. They were these kind of deltoid, curved deltoid type shaped things. These are some of the summer of 1947 press reports of UFOs in Oregon and the Northwest area of the United States. There were quite a few. It was a really hot time that summer. There were just tons of sightings, some by police officers, firefighters, pilots, you name it. And of course, the Roswell incident was right around that time as well. Here's a picture of the infamous posing of the weather balloon debris associated with the Roswell incident. And poor Jesse Marcel was involved in this, and he knew damn well it wasn't a weather balloon, but he was sort of obligated to go along with the charade. Okay. So there were 40 some UFO stories in the first 2 weeks after June 24th, 1947. And they were mostly silvery solid disks, sometimes in formation, traveling at variable speed, sometimes faster than the fastest plane of the day, sometimes slower than prevailing winds, lasting seconds to minutes. Multiple witnesses. Almost all the witnesses were convinced they had observed intelligently controlled craft. Observers included former military and current airline pilots, hunters, attorneys, business people, housewives, teenagers, you name it. The wave of reports started west of the Mississippi from Oklahoma City and Mount Rainier first, and then all over the West. Then by July 4th, sightings had spread to the entire nation. So there's a Navy man, Kenyon, seen from aboard a ship. They mean a Navy ship. Now, I don't think he was on board a spacecraft. He was on a Navy ship on duty when he saw one of these objects along with his crewmates. On July 4th, 2 independent groups of 60 and 100 picnickers in Idaho reported saucers in the sky. By the end of the 2 weeks, over 40 states had sighting reports. The National Guard of Washington and Oregon were concerned enough to send up patrols of search planes with gun camera film sent in from Washington, D.C. So the nation was told by Major General Roger M. Ramey in Fort Worth that a weather balloon crashed near Roswell, New Mexico, and the captured saucer story was false. The Oregonian failed to pick up the official press release from Roswell Army Airfield. The most credible explanation offered was secret U.S. experimental craft or guided missiles. We know today that these are not the solution to the mystery in 1947. One landed and one exploding saucer story already made their appearance in these first couple of weeks, along with the captured disc Roswell story, which was quickly retracted as part of the cover-up that continues today. And we know now that there were other likely crashed objects in the New Mexico, Arizona area, or during that time period, Kingman, Arizona, the plains of San Augustine, and other places around the Southwest. So here we go. The official military response was mostly to deny they were responsible for saucers and also that they knew nothing more than reporters and the public. But all the military responses taken together were contradictory. The phenomenon was treated as a genuine mystery by all concerned, though some initial stories had a ridiculing tone. The tone turned more serious in the second week, however. Many of the explanations of today were already offered within the first 2 weeks. Now, here's one of the most famous cases from Oregon. McMinnville, Oregon, May 11th, 1950. There were multiple eyewitnesses, Paul and Evelyn Trent, and Evelyn's uncle, I believe it was, who saw these objects hovering over the farm. And Evelyn yelled to Paul, "Quick, get the camera." And he went and got the camera and came out, got off 2 shots before the object flew away. Oh, father-in-law. Oh, there we go. The father-in-law. That's Evelyn's father, I guess. Okay. The photos were published in the McMinnville Telephone Register, which is the name of the paper at that time. The photos went worldwide. Life magazine published a story. Now, back then, things went out on the wire services and were picked up by other papers and so forth. So here's the first one. And you can see the object here. You notice these electrical or telephone lines in the photo. Some skeptics have tried to claim that this was simply a hubcap or small model suspended from these wires. But I can tell you that exhaustive analysis has been done by this. And if any of you don't know who this is, Dr. Bruce Maccabee You see the credit down here at the bottom of this photo. Studied this exhaustively, did detailed analysis of the emulsion on the negative, and his conclusion was that the object is definitely much further away than these wires. There's no way it could be directly below the wires. So that shot that explanation down. Here's a close-up of the photo. You notice these lines, these are scratches on the negative because it wasn't handled carefully enough. Let's see here. Here's a Trent photo number 2. And you see the object is flying away. And I think there's a close-up here of number 2. The thing that's interesting about number 2, now these black lines were added for purposes of studying the metrics of the photo. This view with the tower on top is very similar to another case from Rouen, France. I think only taken 2 years later, I believe. An object that looked just like this, a disc like this with a tower in the middle coming up. So the Trents appeared on TV in a show called We the People. And the FBI and the Air Force questioned the Trents. An Air Force agent demanded and got the negatives from the Register, the newspaper. The negatives between 1950 and 1975 were lost and found many times. In 1975, the negatives were mysteriously returned to the Register. And by the way, the publisher of the Register Guard, is, I believe what the newspaper is called today, has them in a safe in his office and won't lend them to anyone under any circumstances because of the history of them being mysteriously lost. So the Trents lived out their lives in McMinnville and never changed their story. I'm going to give you a little background on the Trents. They were just plain old dirt farmers. They weren't anyone that had any notions of coming up with a UFO hoax. They had a great reputation. Their descendants and other family members to this day live in McMinnville and will vouch for their character and say there's no way they would have made up some kind of a silly hoaxed story like this. In 1969, Dr. William Hartman of the Condon Committee concluded that, quote, this is one of the few UFO reports in which all factors investigated, geometric, psychological, and physical, appear to be consistent with the assertion that an extraordinary flying object, silvery, metallic, disc-shaped, tens of meters in diameter, and evidently artificial, flew within the sight of 2 witnesses. In 1974, debunkers Philip Klass, boo hiss, and Robert Schaefer of Psychop did superficial analysis of the photos trying to prove the close-up model theory. But in 1975, optical physicist Dr. Bruce Maccabee of Mufon, QFOS, and FUFOR, that's the Fund for UFO Research, determined that both photos show what is beyond a reasonable doubt a distant object and not a hoaxed model close-up. Anyone a little more background on Dr. Bruce Maccabee? One of his great accomplishments was he and a small team of photographic analysis studied the U-2 photos of Cuba back in the Cuban Missile Crisis days, and they spotted the Russian missile parts that were being offloaded from the ships and set up in Cuba. But you know, now I'm telling you how old I am. That I lived in San Antonio, Texas during the Cuban Missile Crisis. You want to see a bunch of scared people, boy, because we were easily within range, and we had something like 5 Air Force bases around San Antonio, one of which is rumored to have been a nuclear stockpile. Okay, this one is a very interesting case, the Redmond Airport case. September 24th, 1959 at Redmond, Oregon. And at the airport, there were multiple witnesses with binoculars and radar confirmation. What happened was a policeman named Dickerson was at dawn. He was on patrol, and he saw a falling bright object stop 200 feet above the ground and hover. It grew bigger and lighted up the junipers. He drove toward it, and it changed to a dull red and moved to just northeast of the airport. So what he did was he drove straight to the airport, and he contacted the FAA there, and the airport FAA employee Wirtz, Dickerson, and others viewed the object through binoculars. The official FAA logs showed the UFO was reported to the Seattle Air Route Control Center. So here's a little diagram that shows the airport, and here's the administration building where the officer and the FAA employee were observing the object. And the object was over here on the left side, moving this way. It made a lot of different maneuvers, and it lit up very bright. What happened was the FAA scrambled some jets. So where's Hamilton Air Force Base? I think it's in Washington, right? So anyway, the Seattle log said that the UFO was also seen on the radar at Klamath Falls Ground Control Intercept Site, which is, in southern Oregon. F-102s were scrambled, and they gave pursuit. This log, by the way, this was the actual FAA log of all these interactions that happened. Someone leaked this to the UFO investigators before it got shut down by the higher authorities. So that's why we have all this kind of stuff. Usually you don't get this kind of information about these kind of sightings. So the log from the Redmond ground observers continues. As the aircraft approached, the UFO took shape of a mushroom. Observed long yellow and red flames from lower side as UFO rose rapidly and disappeared above the clouds. The UFO was seen again 25 miles south of the airport. Radar showed the UFO south of the airport for 2 hours. So those jets kept pursuing these objects, and they just kept playing cat and mouse for 2 hours, and finally they went away. Now here's a really interesting one. St. Patrick's Day, 1981. Over the Columbia River, we had a sighting, and we have a audio recording, and I'm hoping this works. I've done it before and it's worked. But the St. Helens, Oregon police officer, Russell Yoakum, saw a 30-foot diameter bright pale orange light hovering 80 to 100 feet above the middle of the Columbia River. It lit up the river and the banks like daylight. It emitted a powerful diesel or electric motor sound recorded on audio tape by the police. A CB radio buff, Donald Askins, dangled his microphone out the window to pick up the sound since he was nearest to the UFO. It was interesting how this was done because he was on his CB radio with a friend who had a recording tape set up. And so the police officer put his microphone out the window and opened up the channel, and the guy on the receiving end was recording it over the CB. Oh, I'm back to, I got something mixed up here. Where am I? I got to go forward, not backwards, sorry. So the St. Helens police and a few townspeople drove to a nearby bluff to finish the 30-minute sighting. The UFO moved south, upstream on the Columbia, and then the UFO light and sound disappeared all of a sudden when near Ridgefield, Washington. The audio tape was analyzed by an acoustics expert. He noted the sound had strong peaks at 1,000 hertz and 3,000 hertz with no appreciable harmonics. In other words, the sound was practically pure 1,000 hertz and 3,000 hertz sine waves. Pure sine wave sounds with minimal harmonics are virtually impossible to produce in a natural environment such as the outdoors. Now I'm going to see if I can play the sound. So give it a shot here. So this sound is a very high-pitched sound. It's hard for me to describe. It's a very straight, level sound. It doesn't go up and down or pulsate. It's just a steady, very high-pitched sound, like a high-speed engine or something like that. It's very curious. So let's go on and look at a little bit more about this case. Oh, we're on to something else. I want to tell you also that I had received a report from a woman who apparently had a close encounter on the same morning as this incident, which is St. Patrick's Day, 1981. And she has quite a story to tell, but I'm waiting for her to finish doing hypnotic regression because there's some details that we're trying to get her to remember. We haven't gotten there yet. Okay, let's move on now. Lake Grove multiple UFOs.
But I want to ask you, Tom, what did it
Yeah.
sound like? You've heard it. What did it sound like? Was it like, ooh?
Well, I was trying to describe it. It's a very high-pitched, steady sound. It doesn't go up and down. It doesn't pulsate. It's just a very steady, almost like white noise, but very strong, like an engine revving or something. I don't know. It's hard to describe it. It's very much like it was described in the slide. Okay, so Lake Grove, Oregon, and March 24th, 1996. There were two eyewitnesses with binoculars and a video. Keith Rowell and Tony, his friend, a pseudonym, saw at least 6 luminescent, variously clustered gold, blue, or pink spherical objects. He said they looked like balloons, but he concluded they were not balloons because of the way they moved and the fact that they seemed to be missing some of the characteristic things that you expect to see in a balloon. These were seen in partly cloudy daytime sky in the afternoon. There was a 30-second to 8-minute view through 9-power binoculars. Tony saw one of the UFOs accelerate and rapidly leaving the area. And they seemed to disappear into one of the cloud layers at 6,000 or 10,000 feet. And they looked like this. They were very luminescent. And it seemed that there was an object attached. Keith Rowell is the one who wrote this up, and he was one of the witnesses. He's very convinced these were not just balloons. So here's where he said that the black object seemed to be falling. It fell at a constant rate. And the golden objects seemed to drift in different directions. I wish Keith was here to explain this because this was his sighting and I can't do it justice, to be honest. This was another odd-shaped balloon-like object that they saw. Now here's a crop circle. Here, Hubbard, Oregon, which is south of Portland, on the way down to Salem. It was a crop circle in a dry wheat field, and it was studied by a group called BLT Research. They're a crop circle research group. It appeared in Doug Armott's wheat field. Crop circle researchers Ken Ardinger and Carol Peterson alerted him to it. I'm not sure who him is. Probably the owner of the field. It was discovered by a pilot, probably from Aurora Airport or Lenhart Airport, less than a mile away. An aerial view was shown on KOIN TV on July 22nd of that year, 1998. Many enthusiasts showed up due to publicity, which of course is a bad thing for crop circles because you get trampled. There were 240 kilovolt power lines running through the field. The formation could not be seen from South Whiskey Hill Road. Ken Ardinger and Carol Peterson, crop circle researchers with the Center for Crop Circle Studies, investigated it. Mike Downey and Keith Rowell of Oregon MUFON investigated, took measurements, crop samples, soil samples, photos, etc., and sent them to Nancy Talbot at BLT Research. They're in Michigan, by the way. I don't know, you might have heard of them. BLT Research found the characteristics of genuine crop circles in the Whiskey Hill material. You should look at their website if it's still up. I don't know, this material is a little bit old. Here's what it looked like. Here's the aerial view of it. And here's the nearest airport. And the crop circles here. This is the nearest airport. Here's a close-up of part of the formation. And you can see the reason we know it's a genuine crop circle is the way the wheat is smashed down in a very neat circular swirling pattern. And the wheat at the edge of the smashed down area is standing very straight. There's none of this messy smashing that you would get if someone just mechanically smashed it down with a board. It's all extremely neat and tidy. Here's some investigators doing measurements. You can see what it's like. There's the power line towers for the 240 kilovolt power towers. Here's one of the other arms of the formation. A close-up of one of the small circles. This is near and dear to my heart because I was the investigator on this one. The Gresham Triangle case. This occurred August 29th, 2003, near Southeast Division Street in Gresham, Oregon. There were two witnesses. Victor, we'll call him Victor, and saw the objects for 7 minutes. And then we'll call her Luann for about 8 seconds. And I was the investigator. Victor was driving east along Southeast Division in Gresham, and he spotted a very bright light off to his left over the hill that's there in the neighborhood. And he realized that it was a stationary light. And he was curious about it because he didn't think it looked like a plane. Then as the light changed, he was sitting at a red light at this point. When the light changed, he started to proceed, and he found he was having trouble seeing it because it was off to his left and he had to watch the traffic. At some point, he decided to turn left and go into the neighborhood where the object was and get a better look at it. And as he made another left turn and went up one of the smaller local residential streets, there was the object straight in front of him, you know, maybe a whole block or more from him. And he stopped. There was no traffic on the street. It was a residential street. He stopped and he realized that he had a camera either on the back seat or in the footwell of the back seat area of his car. So as he tried to keep his eyes on the object and reach back and feel around for his camera. And by the time he found the camera, the object just made a lateral, flat, rotating turn and moved off to his left fairly swiftly. He saw that it had 3 lights, 2 white and 1 red, as was one of the views that he got, but it was definitely a triangle. The object was totally silent. And Victor noticed that other people in the neighborhood were looking at the object, and he wanted to stop and talk to some of them, but he decided to try to follow the object instead, which he later admitted was a mistake because the street he turned on to try to follow it had speed bumps on it, and he couldn't go very fast. Then he got down to Division again because he realized he'd gone all the way around the block, and Division's a busy street, and he realized that he couldn't get out on Division very quickly, and he just saw the object receding away toward the northwest. And the odd thing about it is the object was, this direction it was traveling at this point would have taken it right over one of the approach paths to Portland International Airport. So it had to be very close to the airport and approaching it right across one of the standard airline traffic approach paths. Meanwhile, Luann was at home, sitting outside and smoking a cigarette. She was working on getting items ready for a garage sale that we're going to have. This was the weekend before Labor Day. It was a Friday night, and they wanted to have a garage sale or yard sale on Labor Day weekend. So she was getting her stuff ready. And what happened was she got a feeling of something going over, and it bothered her because she has a pacemaker, and people with pacemakers often they experience a disturbance of their pacemaker if they get too close to a magnetometer, and that's what she felt. She said it was just like if she got too close to a metal detector, and it made her look around, and then she looked up and she saw this object with a triangle with 3 bright lights on the corners just glide right over. And it stopped and hovered, and she told me where she saw it hovering, and she pointed out the angle so that I could get an angular elevation of her sighting. That was part of the data that we're going to cover in a moment. So both witnesses agree very much in their basic drawings of the object they saw. So Victor is a graphic artist. In fact, he's did some work that's quite famous, or used to be years ago. And this was his line drawing of the object. This is Luann's drawing of the object closest approach. She was not a professional artist, so you can see the difference in quality, but the same idea. So independent UFO researcher Eric Byler referred this case to Tom Bowden, who contacted the primary witness. Eric had received airline flight path information from Jerry Gersbach of Portland International Airport, and he passed it on to Tom. Tom made up a flyer for the neighborhood and posted it. Luann called Tom after seeing the neighborhood flyer. So here I had 2 sightings of what appeared to be the same object from 2 different angles, and I'll show you how I figured that out. Yeah, but it says here I triangulated the distance and height of the UFO from observations at 2 different locations. The object was at 500 to 800 feet altitude and 70 to 90 feet in size. I'll show you how I decided this. Okay, I used Victor's drawing in a poster that I put around the neighborhood, and waited to see if anyone would contact me. And the second witness, Luann, we'll call her Luann, contacted me a little while later, and she says, "Oh, I'm pretty sure I saw what was on your poster. And I said, okay, and that's how I got to talk to her. Here's the map of the air traffic in the area. It doesn't show the object, obviously, and one thing that is important to know, and some of you may already know that, most radar used for air traffic control is based on transponders, and that's called a secondary radar. Primary radar is used for other things like weather and stuff like that, but it isn't used for tracking planes very much because the new transponders-based radar gives so much more information to air traffic controllers. They know the identity of the flight, they know the airspeed, they know the altitude, all this kind of data that the transponder gives them. And so all this stuff is all based on only air traffic that had transponders on it. Here's my map of the area. And I hope you can see this well. This was where the first witness was, right here. And this is where the second witness was. And he was looking straight east down the street, saw the object. She was looking northeasterly, and her angle range somewhere between here and here. And so if you see this nice triangle here, I was able to do a little calculation here based on that. And that's where I came up with these figures. I dusted off my trigonometry book and studied a little bit, and I figured out how to do the calculation. Now, this guy, Victor, he did a little simulation drawing here, and I want to see if this will work for you. If I click on it, do you see it move?
Not yet.
There it goes.
Yeah.
All right. This guy's a professional graphic artist, illustrator, and animator. So he could make up stuff like that. That was how he showed that it moved. He said it didn't bank like an aircraft would. It just made a flat turn and then moved off like that. Okay. Now here's another case. December 30th, 2005 at about 6:10 a.m. just outside Astoria, Oregon on Highway 30. We have three witnesses and a woman and her son and the son's wife. Jerry Schiffman was the investigator. So the witnesses and the infant son that was with them got up to drive to Portland International Airport early in the morning. They drove east along Highway 30 about 15 minutes, and it is hilly and curvy in this section of Highway 30. They all saw bright strobing lights to the left of the road. They lost sight briefly and then saw for about 15 seconds a classic flying saucer hovering about 200 feet away or so. It was at treetop level. Brilliant white lights poured from the apparent windows from a domed object about the size of a large SUV. The saucer lit up the surrounding ground and area. Elizabeth slowed down, and they watched as the object hovered motionless and apparently soundless. 5 or 6 strobing lights were seen on the bottom. They strobed in unison. Flash, flash, pause, flash, flash, pause. About a second or two long per cycle. All agreed it wasn't a hoax or a helicopter or aircraft. It was a flying saucer. And this is just a photograph of the area, not the exact spot, but a similar area. You can see small trees. It's not a large mature forest here. A field and low brush in the foreground. And this is a illustration of the object, the way they saw it. You can see the squarish windows at the top and the round lights beaming down. These bottom lights were the ones that flashed in sequence or in unison. Lights facing down on the bottom. Okay. Appaloosa Way video case. Now here we go with Keith Rowell again. He's quite the camera shutterbug. He is a very accomplished digital photographer, and he took some video of an object here. So if anyone has questions or something, you should just interrupt me and stop me, because, you know.
Oh, okay. We
I
didn't know that. We
actually-
were so polite. So anyone can ask you. Go ahead. You want to
Yeah,
start?
sure.
Mary?
I wanted to go back to 2 slides because they went by.
Okay, you got to tell me which ones we're talking about.
I thought it was a very good idea, and this one to put up signs like that.
Oh, what?
The wanted.
This, the poster?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah?
What did it say? Wanted what?
Oh, wanted
hard to-
information about an unusual flying craft, not a normal aircraft, seen August 29th, 2003, about 10:30 p.m. in the vicinity of.
And did you get any? Did you
Yes.
get any reports from those posters?
Yes, the second witness contacted me based on this poster.
Wow.
I also got a
Okay,
few crank
great.
calls and other silly nonsense, but I did get the second witness based on this poster. Okay,
Great. So it worked.
yeah.
And then the other one was the one with the little light, similar to our UFO thing.
You have to give me a hint here. You're talking about the picture here?
That one, yeah. I just wanted to get a little more info on this one. Astoria classic saucer. Lights
There's
face
not, there's, other than the description I just went over, there's no really more information. I mean, it was a saucer shaped object. The windows on the top were squarish, looked like windows or portholes. The lights on the bottom aimed downward, and the lights on the bottom were the ones that flashed, all in unison.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, let me go on to this one. This is Keith's video case, Keith Rowell. He went out to the front yard, looked up and saw a balloon or UFO and decided to videotape it. Ran back inside, got camcorder, taped 6 seconds, dead battery, ran back inside for a new battery, failed at that, grabbed the camera with a long lens and ran back outside, and the object was gone. He walked up and down the street looking for the object, but it was gone for good. So this was September 24th, 2006 in the afternoon. Okay, he has more about this case at OregonMufon.com. I'm going to show you the video, or actually, I don't know if I can play the video. This was what he saw. He saw what looked like balloons moving like this. But for some reason, he's done a lot of photographs of what at first look appear to be balloons, but when he studies them further, he decides they're not balloons. Okay, I have 2 slides here that don't show up right, so I can't show you these pictures. They just don't work. This presentation is kind of old, and so it's no longer working as it should. Okay, now we're going to play the video, and you can see the objects here, so try to keep an eye on it as it plays. That's the 6 seconds you got before the battery died. Okay, we'll try it again. All right. Okay, in 2007, near Medford, Oregon, we had multiple eyewitnesses and a videotape in this case, Karen and Richard Brown, those are pseudonyms, were driving south along Modoc Road into Medford when a flash caught Karen's eye. She saw an odd object and began videotaping as they drove along. They couldn't pull over because they were hauling a long trailer. The object moved slowly along among the clouds. A plane landing at Medford Airport, videotaped also, was clearly different. So here we go. Now, the UFO shows alternating light and dark along its length. I don't know if you could see that very well. It's a little fuzzy. That's just a photo. Now here's the airplane. The same photographer with the same camera took a photo of an airplane. And here's the other object. You can see how different they are. They weren't very far from the Medford Airport. So this plane was probably I think there was landing, if I'm not mistaken. So here he did some metrics on it because he studied the metrics he could get from the photographic image. And he's comparing the pixel count and other metrics of the two images. I don't want to go into all the details. Okay, here's the 17-second video from this case. Car's moving, so it's kind of jerky. See the object there against the clouds.
Mhm.
Okay, want to see it again?
Yeah, this is impressive, eh? Wow.
That kind of looked like two of them to me.
All right, I'm showing the video now. I'm going to show it again just in case something grabbed the spotlight here. It's hard to tell. I'm pretty sure it's only one object, but the thing is, because the vehicle is moving and the frame rate of the video is not the greatest, so it jumps around a lot and might make it look like multiple objects, but I'm sure it's only one because Keith did quite a bit of study of this, and he's convinced that it's only one object. All right, let's move on then. The conclusion is you can go to OregonMufon.com and see some of the things we have posted there. We have a lot of the slideshows from talks we've done on the website. And it says join MUFON. Here we have references, and I'm going to go on to more references. If anyone wants more information about any of these things, just got to let me know.